Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome, or in many cases, for many of you, I should say, welcome back, as you have probably attended other sessions earlier this morning or yesterday. This is workshop 8 of the Rural Vision Week, dedicated to people, policy, practice, proofing and implementing a new rural reality. I'm Flavio Conti from the contact point of the European Network for Rural Development, and together with my colleagues, we will be guiding you through this session. And we will be discussing pretty much governance mechanisms and other tools and resources needed to allow the rural communities to fully realize their potential, to empower them also by better informing the shaping of all public policies relevant to improve the quality of lives in rural areas beyond rural development and the agricultural policy only. Let me just provide you with a couple of a few rules and technical announcements. The meeting is being recorded, and please keep your mics off unless you're taking the floor. If you haven't done so, it would be good if you could rename yourself with your first name, family name, name of your organization you're representing, and the code of the country you're connecting from, so that we are all aware who is there on the other hand and from where we are connecting ourselves. Also, you can indeed write comments, as many of you are already doing, in the chat area, share messages with your friends that you might recognize, or participants, with everyone, but still it's a networking event, so we pretty much encourage you to raise your hand, your virtual hand, as Zoom offer you this possibility, and to take the floor when the time will come for questions, and especially during the group discussions we're going to have. We encourage you to speak up with your voice. We want to hear your voices, and that's what these sessions are for. And now let me guide you through the agenda, and I'm going to explain you the work which is ahead of us. We're going to first spend some 30 minutes together in an introductory session in plenary with the support of keynote speakers, and just setting the scene. And we have the pleasure to have with us Patricia Andriot and Marc Laget from the French National Agency for Territorial Cohesion. They will provide us with the presentations on the lessons learned through the process of developing a French rural agenda, which is pretty relevant, can provide some very good insights for any future efforts, also attempts at the EU level in such direction in the future. And they will also focus on some interesting approaches to governance at the local level, involving different rural actors at the local level. And this presentation will be very well complemented by the presentation provided by Michael Schmitz. That's a mistake over there, pardon, Michael, from the German County Association and the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. Michael will provide us a perspective of the municipalities, of the rural municipalities. After this 30 minutes introductory session, we will be splitting in 4 different breakout group discussions in parallel, and we will discuss the key ideas that should go into the visions, again very much focusing on the governance mechanisms, and also what kind of step changes and conditions are needed to get there, to get to the vision, to realize all these good ideas that we will be collecting. These 4 groups I was saying will be each of them dedicated to a different focus, different perspective, but we are not constrained by this perspective. Of course, you should feel free yourself to raise any other ideas to a broader view. So we will be starting from a focus on rural governance in the first group, which will be introduced by a presentation of Marjorie Jouen from the Jacques Delors Institute, focusing on the idea of a rural semester, but then we will listen to Marjorie's ideas. And then second group will start from a perspective of the very important concept of rural proofing, and will be introduced by MarieClotteau from Euromontana, and Euromontana is indeed quite extensive experience on the idea of rural proofing. And then a third group will move from the perspective of rural intelligence and the idea of having a rural observatory, collecting data, bringing together the science and the rural actors to make a better use of more tailored data collected at the local level to inform the policy shaping. This will be introduced by Louise Vestergård in representation of the very interesting SHERPA interfaces of Horizon 2020 funded projects. And finally, a fourth group will move from the more perspective of the governance at the level of the rural communities. And it will be introduced by Hans-JørgenJensen, who is coordinator of the Danish Laget of Bornholm. And as I said, don't feel constrained by these focuses. You can, in broader terms, share any other good ideas still relevant to governance mechanisms to empower the rural communities. And we will then be back in plenary for 20 minutes feedback session before being ready to wrap up the meeting and closing. So without further ado, I'm gonna give the floor to Patricia and Jouen and Marc Laget for their presentation, and I will be myself shifting presentations, and I will be showing you a presentation of Patricia and Jouen and Marc. Patricia, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I stopped.
Not at all.
Okay, now I think it's okay. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and hello everybody. And I'm proud to make a presentation of rural agenda, French rural agenda. Flavio, you want to share my screen, or you want I do that? Okay, thank you much. So French rural agenda since 2 years is making to countryside territories of tomorrow. Is it a political ambition? And concretely, it's 181 measures to promote rurality. And next slide, yes, thank you. So why we have a rural agenda in France? Maybe we start with a kind of paradox. Now in France, with a new definition about our national statistic organization, we have 30% of population who lives in rural areas, rural territories, but and half population would like to live in rural areas when we make some national consultation of all. But we have a strong feeling of failing public policies for rural areas. And maybe you remember the Yellow Jacket crisis in 2018. And this crisis was not only about rural territories, but specifically and focus with these territories. And with this crisis, the government decide to make an action plan and decide to have a transposition of European concept of agenda rural. And what you see the new areas of rural in France about density. Definition of rural in France is about density, and not just, before it was just if you were under 2,000 people in village, you were rural, but now it's about density. Next slide, please. So what method for this agenda? It is a cooperative governance method. We have a large public consultation after crisis Yellow Jacket. We have a national grid debate. Maybe you remember in each small villages, in each town, or each group of inhabitants wants to make a debate. It was possible. We have a national framework, and there is a large consultation. Another characteristic is to have a multi-level consultation and management with local referent, ministry referents. One other ambition is to breaking silos. And last ambition is to test innovation and develop new practices by demonstration. So I think it's the best, it's a characteristic of our method. And The consultation during about 6 months, I think, and after 6 months, the result is an action plan, which includes, I already said, 181 measures to support the inclusion of rural areas in terms of health, mobility, house, employment, public services, and it's not more money for rurality, not only more money for rurality or not specific measures for rurality, but it's the added value of the rural agenda is to have in each public policies to have asked the question, is it adapted for rurality or not? What we have to do specific for rurality in this policy. But it's not new measures, but it's to have asked the question about rurality is the method. Please, Flavio, it's possible to have, thank you, new slide. And in this agenda, we could say measures are very concrete. We have 5 thematics. One thematic about the ecologic transition, one thematic about the attractivity of territories and the economy. One other thematic is about public services. One other thematic is about to have a better consideration for our elective people in rural, small mayor or something. And the last thematic is about governance of the agenda. And in these 5 thematics, we have very concrete measures, as for example, connected competencies is to have some online formation in a rural small town. We have another initiative, for example, is to implement more coffee in a small village. Another is to renew small railway lines. Other things about the house mentorships. Other things is about to engineering in local communities. For example, just in this moment, I think at the end of this week, we open a new system to have new job for engineering in small village. And the state of France give subsidies about that, 0.5% of the cost. Another measure is to have public services to less than 30 minutes of every rural inhabitants. We call that France service house. You have a picture about. We have another measures is new place, new links, but I don't speak about that because Marc will make a presentation about. So it's to give you some example of concrete measures. My job is to have contact with whole ministry to see what they develop and to be sure to ensure that that measures increase and that measure run. Okay, and it's not just objective but it's become a reality. It's my job to be in contact with. We do not. Not exactly nothing. We do not implement measures by ourselves. Each ministry implement measures and we just have a following of these works. And we have works of interface, to be in interface. And we have a referent of rurality in each French department. And we make some link between referent in ministry and referent rurality in department. New slide, please, Flavio, thank you. And in order to ensure the effective implementation of each measure, we have a specific governance, I have already said. I've been set up with a lot of monitoring committees, with a referent. And since last July, we have a dedicated state secretariat, we call Jouen. And it's very important for us because we have a very political strong volunteer to develop and to be care with the rural territories. So it's not, it's an important symbol. I think it's last slide. Yes, it is. So
thank you very much.
It's a short presentation, but
thanks a lot, Patricia. Thank you. I need to give the floor to Marc Laget, your colleague, to continue the presentation on additional approaches on governance at the local level. Marc, I have to ask you to keep the time, and that's my role as a chair, to try to stick to 5 minutes for your part, and thank you very much.
So I go ahead. Thank you very much. And after my colleague Patricia, I'm gonna present you what we are doing in this field of third places. As you know, France is one of the largest and most populous countries in Europe, with rural municipalities, 40% of them located in quite far away from cities, and population largely spread on low density areas like mountain, campaigns, suburbs, etc. So therefore, France is a country very difficult to implement a new policy for digital affairs. The first step was to carry out a large high broadband network. It was a 1 million kilometers optical fiber task for a cost that more than 30 billion euros. But by 2022, everyone, even in the countryside, will be correctly connected most of the time through fiber. Then we have developed an approach to support the use of digital technology for everyone. Currently, the National Agency of Territorial Cohesion is deploying a recruitment program of 4,000 digital advisors and complementary actions to reach the most vulnerable users for a total cost of 250 billion euros. A third program, which is one of the main measures of the rural agenda, is to develop online services shared by a large number of communities, particularly small ones, which do not have enough engineering resources to develop citizen relationship applications, whether e-education, e-health, mobility, or e-democracy. And for 1 year now, we have implemented a program called New Places, New Links. Next slide, please. This program proposed to develop some actions in large fields as bioagriculture, local food, short commercial circuits, craft work using Fab Labs and Living Labs, cultural animation, fabrication of digital training, and telework. The objective of the program is to set up 300 territorial factories which are responsible for providing development tools to citizens, project promoters, and to all third places around, particularly in the least development regions. Already 218 winners have been selected through 5 calls. 58 of them are located in rural areas where these projects often mobilize European funding. Next slide, please. 3 categories of actors are generally involved: associations, communities, and businesses. The challenge is to associate them in a robust way by taking into account 3 dimensions: the deployment of the project over an as wide as possible geographical area, the support of a balanced economic model combining private resources and public funds, and the most important, the openness of governance. This third point is essential to ensure that the evolution of the project will correspond to the expectations of regional and local actors. Next slide. This governance is generally open to many categories of partners who are involved in advisory committees, scientific committees, partner councils, or sometimes in the board of directors. Concerning simple users, support measures are implemented to get them really associated. For example, in training in taking responsibility, so the participation of each one is according to his or her profile and abilities. The winning is leading to clearly established consultation or voting rules, throughout a process that starts during the diagnosis phase and then involves the partners in the decision-making, sometimes taken by a qualified majority of 2/3, in order to guarantee the existence of a real consensus of the choices of investment and organization of collaborative projects. Networks working with appropriate digital tools makes these organizations efficient. Next slide, please. These processes are based on legal supports allowing the involvement of all actors, either within associative consortium or within cooperatives that allow the development of activity or even investment in small businesses. The most advancing ones are controlling the management of real estate acquisitions. The first results are encouraging, since there is an increasing number of places and members, a greater attractiveness of small municipalities when equipped, and population gains. For example, 40 families arrived in a village of 800 inhabitants within the 2 last years. There is also very interesting collective propositions about smart village projects, experiences as, for example, do-ocracy management process, encouraging project leaders to create quickly by implementing regulatory processes at a later date if necessary. And is my last comment. So the development of third places in a collective way is an interesting objective that pioneering territories propose to achieve. Our national agency, which serves communities and supports their projects, seeks to implement the appropriate processes to achieve these objectives. It mobilizes, in particular, experts who help to formalize diagnoses of territories and needs of the population. We then set up, with our partners, networks of peer-to-peer animation and sharing, vocational training programs, new financial aids from the states, as well as from local authorities or Europe, and at least an evolution of the legal and regulatory framework in order to sustain this interesting happening in rural areas. Thank you very much.
Marc, Patricia, thank you very much. I think you did really great also managing time. Thank you so much. And there is much we can learn from the French experience indeed in developing a rural agenda, and that can provide really a lead also for any such attempt also at the EU level. I would like now to give the floor to Michael Schmitz. And Michael, I believe you now do have co-hosting rights. Voila, there you're already sharing your screen. Thank you very much, Michael. The floor is yours, please.
Great. So now you should be able to hear me. Thank you very much, Flavio, and thank you, dear colleagues. I think that was very interesting. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to just quickly present CMR's approach to the long-term vision for rural areas. And just for those of you who don't know CMR is a European umbrella organization of local government associations representing roughly 150,000 municipalities and regions, consisting of cities, municipalities, counties, from rural areas, urban areas, coastal regions, mountainous regions. So we try to be very comprehensive in our approach. And so before I start with the actual presentation, I'd like to talk a bit about perception. So if you think of rural areas, what comes to your mind? So these three, I guess, will be considered rural by most of us. The top left is in Baden-Württemberg. It's a municipality of 2,500 inhabitants. Top right is in Grindelwald in Switzerland, which is not the EU, I know, but it's picture perfect rural, in my opinion. And the one in the middle is from my home region in Rheinland-Pfalz, a municipality of 2,500 inhabitants. However, how about those two? Just let me see. Oh, yeah. How about those two? So the lower left is in the municipality of Künzelsau, that you probably never heard of. It's in Baden-Württemberg. It's 15,000 inhabitants, and they have the headquarters of a company called Wirth. It's a company that provides screws and fasteners and screw accessories, and they employ 79,000 people worldwide. And the top right corner, it's the Audi Forum in Neckarsulm. It's also a small municipality in Baden-Württemberg. There's no particular reason why these two are in Baden-Württemberg. It's just because I know they are well-known companies. It's a municipality of 26,000 inhabitants, and the building is next to an Audi factory employing 16,000 people and building 160,000 cars. So in my opinion, this whole area would still be considered rural, even though it's not typically rural. And why am I telling you this? The reason I'm telling you this is because not every rural area is equal. They're very diverse, they're very heterogeneous. Rural is not agriculture. Rural is innovation, rural is diverse economic approaches, rural is citizens living in rural areas. However, there are a few things that rural areas have in common. Some of the challenges, and those you know, is the provision of public services. From our perspective, this is particularly problematic due to the lower population density. There's less fees and less taxation, and so it's harder to finance these services. This is not a problem in Europe alone. I remember I was in Malaysia and they were talking about the digital divide in rural areas. I know that President Biden is actually working on a similar thing when it comes to digitalization. We have aging population, we have sometimes depopulation, even though that is highly diverse. And sometimes in the same region, people move towards to certain municipalities from bigger cities, sometimes the other way around. And that makes it really, really hard for municipalities and regions to plan ahead. A good example is public transport. In Germany, I can just give you an example. 1/3 of the transport cost for one bus ride is actually covered by the ticket that you pay. The other 2/3 is covered by tax money. So in order to make this more comprehensive, you would need more money somehow. And this is particularly problematic when it comes to low emission mobility. With these situations likely to proceed in, the rural-urban divide is likely to grow. What we also see is skepticism towards EU and politics in general, even though there was a Eurobarometer survey last year that came to the conclusion that the highest level of trust is actually that citizens have is actually towards the local and regional governments. And that is quite substantially so. And the last challenge we actually see is that there's no horizontal and multi-level framework for the development of rural areas on an EU level. We have the Cork 2.0 declaration, but that is less binding than we had hoped, to be honest. Not every EU policy is actually taking into account the points that were agreed there. Yes, so the next major challenge is obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, limiting the resources of public authorities, even though that is also a major opportunity because a lot of people are actually considering moving to rural areas from the urban centers. But this requires the necessary services and infrastructure to be available in these places. I just wanted to talk to you about how the 2040 rural areas, or the rural areas in 2040 could look like. In my opinion, the most important thing is a coherent framework of coherent regulatory framework on an EU, national, regional, local level. So the more low you go, the more concrete it is. And we actually really support a bottom-up approach, meaning that there's very abstract rules on an EU level, leaving a lot of leeway even to the national level, then to the regional level, and the concrete implementation will then be left to the local authorities, thus harvesting the benefits of economic decentralization, diversification, giving local and regional authorities sufficient funds at their disposal, additional funding being provided on the supra-local level. And this allows for the necessary infrastructure and public services to be available or accessible for all citizens, and thus giving citizens the opportunity to choose where they want to live and work. The last point is very, very important to us, that citizens are involved in local policy making, and I can tell you they currently are. I always tell this story of a mayor who got a call from a mom complaining that the school bus was again running late, and he told her on the phone, "Okay, I'm on it. I'll solve this problem for you," and he did. And I always think, you know, local authorities are the level that are closest to the citizens. And that is why the trust is so high. So this is the reason why we'd actually have, in my opinion, why they need to be very, very much involved in the rural vision. And how this can be done, I wanted to present you real quick. So first of all, we need a change of narrative. So rural areas are not only agriculture. Rural areas are actually the key to a balanced economic, social, territorial development. We need to really use the potential. And I'd like to give you an example. Imagine you have a 100 square meter apartment with a smallish kitchen, and you invite 50 people to a party, and everyone's in the kitchen, as it happens, mostly. So what do? I mean, you have all this unused space, all this unused potential. What do? Maybe you put out snacks so people will actually move to other places in your apartment. But how would you do this on an EU level? How would you do this in regulatory terms? I think what we need is clear horizontal targets on an EU level and guidelines for EU policies, making EU policies less territorially blind, really looking at rural proofing. And I'm keen to hear what Marjorie has to say and what MarieClotteau has to say. We need real structural policies, meaning thematic objectives have to be tailored towards the challenges in rural areas. We need holistic rural development, taking into account not only farmland, but also municipalities, smaller cities, because they provide services. We need to encourage multi-level government dialogue, again, the bottom-up approach. And this is also, I'll give you one last example, president of the county of Altötting in Bayern, Bavaria. He had the idea of setting up a digital vaccination passport in his county. So people get a QR code that is valid in his county. They can move around with this passport, but it's only valid in his county. So this might serve now as a good approach for a national strategy. But local measures are not efficient without a framework on a level above. That's why we really need to take into account all levels. And the last thing is targeted funding with equal access for organizations and entities of all sizes, just making sure that even smaller municipalities or entities, non-governmental or governmental, that don't have the personnel to deal with funding and EU implementation, have the same access to funds and have the same possibility to actually adapt EU rules. And that can only be achieved by making them as easily applicable as possible. And that will be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Really, all your presentation and Marc and Patricia's one very well introduced also our breakout discussions. I will definitely move, by the way, away from the kitchen. If you put some snacks for me around, I will definitely go for those. That very catchy example. Thank you very much. I think honestly that I saw that there were exchanges going on in the chat area, and I would like to thank a lot Patricia for providing replying to questions regarding the rural agenda experience. So colleagues, participants have been already active in writing questions. Perhaps we could take just one question if anyone would like, but again I invite you to just speak up, and so either you raise your hand or just please step in and take the floor. Just one question if you like, otherwise we will move to the groups. Anyone? Or you are keeping all your questions and ideas for the group discussions? That could be the case. Well, I believe indeed Patricia and Maria and several colleagues have been very active in the chat area. So I will say really thank you again to our keynote speakers. Thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks a lot, Marc and Patricia. We also have a link to a very nice video produced about the rural agenda experience in France. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with subtitles yet in English. It's only in French for the time being. We will share the link on the website of the ENRD contact point. So you can find it there on the website of the ENRD. And right now, I would say we can split in the breakout discussions, and I invite you to enjoy indeed the discussions on the ideas and step changes to realize the vision, speaking still about governance mechanisms to empower rural communities. I think we can now break into the groups, and we will be back for a feedback session.
Hello there. Good to see you all. It's the last workshop of the day and of the week. We will then go into plenaries and so on. So those were two very, very interesting presentations, I think, with a lot of lessons for what we would like to do at a European level. That's enough from me. We are going to, in this session, again, look at the two key questions that we have been looking at all through the week. And those are, what are the key issues that should be addressed or be in the vision? And what should we do to get there? So we've already heard a series of points. I think some of the key points that both Patricia and Marc have mentioned we should bear in mind. But before we go into the discussion, we're going to have one elevator pitch from Marjorie Jouen. So over to you, Marjorie.
Good morning, everybody. As I would like to present you a kind of result from a discussion we had with 8 former members of the thematic working group that worked previously on the scenarios for the future rural areas. And we were, so there was people from Italy, Spain, France, Germany, and the EU network, just to try to elaborate on this question of rural semester as a tool to deliver a truly holistic policy for rural areas. So to answer the two questions, first, where do we want to go? This proposal consists in engaging with the existing semester, which aims at increasing socioeconomic convergence and ensure that the full range of rural concerns, environmental, social, economic, digital, educational concerns are reflected in it. You know that the European semester became a powerful mechanism of coordination of the national policy, not only as regards the structural or budgetary reforms when it was institutionalized, but also now as regards ecological transition and digital transition. The mechanism is based on the review of national reform programs with specific national recommendations elaborated by the European Commission. Both coordination and convergence are targeted with this mechanism. So this idea of rural semester is just to be integrated in this system. While the European structural funds are part of this process, we just see that the agricultural policy is not, and precisely the policies that are implemented in rural areas. We can consider that it is nonsense, as rural areas are the basis of our resilience collectively and individually. They shelter resources that will become more and more precious, such as land, water, energy. All of us need also to rely on structured and healthy local communities, in complement with well-functioning public services framed by an efficient welfare state, and of course, I should say, democratic multi-level institutions. For the moment, rural development policies are not as widespread in the member states as generally discussed. We discussed them in the European arenas. So to answer the second question, how to get there? The process should be based on the definition of specific targets, measures, and indicators adapted to the rural context. It means sparsely populated areas and or remote places. In particular, the following domains should be covered: diversified economy, including services and industry, quality and sustainable food, innovation and digitalization, well-being via access to public services. It means transport, healthcare, education, broadband, housing. Then there would be the guidelines that should take into account new criteria, incentives, and co-funding rates fit for small entities. The EU instrument should be implemented in a more flexible manner, in particular, in order to take into account the characteristic of diversity of rural areas. The cooperation and sometimes complementarity between rural and urban areas should also be included. And democracy should also be enhanced, as we have seen already in most of the workshops we had. An element which is really important is linked with genuine rural data provided by the foreseen creation of this EU Rural Observatory. They are crucial to assess the level of fragility, weakness, decline of places, the possible targets to be achieved, and better identify the successful, effective policies. They would also make it visible the total amount of financial resources, European, the structural funds, the ERDF, but not only, and the national and regional fund, and their distribution to rural areas in comparison with other areas. And these data should be weighted by inhabitants as well as by square kilometers. And to just end with the proposal, when could we get there? In fact, the launching may be possible by 2022 or 23 if it is supported by the ministers in charge of rural areas, the European Parliament, and the other EU institutions. Well, just to think of what had happened with other kind of mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. And you've covered a huge area with some very, very concrete proposals. And actually, you cover the two questions that we're trying to deal with. Can we try to separate them a bit first? So I would like to first of all hear from people about the proposal. This idea then of engaging with the semester in order to provide rural areas with a greater voice. And then Marjorie has suggested a series of areas that should be addressed and are specifically rural. So diversified economy, services, food, innovation, and there are others I think down there. These could be added to or subtracted from. So can I just, first of all, hear some ideas about this. This is about engaging with the semester. This is what we would like to happen. So rural voices are more strongly represented in EU decision-making processes. That would be the sort of slogan. Anyone, I know it's end of the afternoon, but somebody going to come in there. If nobody comes in, I'm going to pick on people. So be careful.
Like I might have.
Raise your hands, please. Yes, okay. I didn't get you, Federico. Federico, yeah, okay. Use the raise your hand thing if you can, because I can't see that you want to come in otherwise. Okay, Federico, please.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I can't find the raise the hands button in the screen, so that's why.
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
That's not really. So yes, so good afternoon. I'm Federico Sgar. We represent the Coalition of European Agri-Regions, and I also work for the Brittany region in Brussels. Just maybe a very quick reaction on the proposal in general of a rural semester, let's say. I have maybe very quick question. Reaction maybe. The European semester actually is really in between the Commission and the member states. I mean, the European semester cycle is clearly an exercise between the Commission and the member states. I understand the point of having a more comprehensive approach and framework for the rural areas in the semester and associating other funds. But if the question is more about the governance, in a way of decision making, let's say, and how we can take part in the decision making, and if the question is also how to empower the rural areas and representatives from rural areas in this process, I actually don't see how the European semester could be one of the. I don't see the governance in the European semester from the point of view of, for example, local and regional authorities. The cohesion is now part of the European semester since 2019. There isn't a real involvement of regional authorities, for example, who are managing authorities in this cycle. It's clearly there are recommendations on how to use the funds, but the European semester cycle is not made to involve local and managing authorities, at least for the moment. So I think that before getting to the European semester, we should really ask ourselves the question of what is the governance of the future action plan of the European vision for long-term vision for rural areas. I think we are maybe going a bit too far with this idea of the semester, but maybe this is just my point of view.
Okay, Federico, that one thing does not preclude the other, I think, but I think your point is very important. And I have to say, I am not an expert on the procedures of the semester in any way. But your point is that the governance is not of the semester is not very representative. So we would need, you're saying there is a need for a more representative governance mechanism. In addition, at least, to that. Would anyone else like to come out on that? And if we do need a more representative, what form could it take, and who could make it up? Marjorie, you seem to have you want to reply, but is nobody able to put their hands up? Because I can't see any hands. Marjorie, do come in.
Yes, well, that's the question is that it's a bit a question between the egg and the hen. And when shall we have to begin with a question? Well, the current situation is that for now, at least 30 years, it was nicely said that we need a rural policy, a rural development policy, but however, the heading was mostly something linked to the ministries of agriculture. And I think that we should have to think that if we want to push really in the member states, the fact that there will be a real rural development policy, it cannot, unless you really address this question in saying to the government, and it will be in charge of making the coordination inside the member state, to say, yes, we need this kind of targets, and so you have really to show that you are doing that and that, because we know that this is a process of coordination. So it means that you need to know also what are the good practices or the good policies done elsewhere. It's not something coming from nowhere. However, if you don't have this kind of obligation, you never arrive to something. I know how it works with agenda, the territorial agenda, etc., etc. The problem is that mostly the ministers in charge of regional development are not enough, and governance is probably not enough as I would say, a process that is really asking and more requiring member states to react and to implement policy. And that's, of course, well, governance is nice. However, to some extent, if you really need and you really want to have a rural development policy, you need to ask for targets, data, etc., etc.
Okay, so it's a question, chicken and egg, chicken and egg rather than hen and egg, but chicken and egg. So it's what you do first, and what happens to actually make the change, I think. Can I have somebody else? Is there no other hands up, or at least I cannot see any hands? No, I cannot see any hands.
Paolo.
Yeah, Paolo?
Hi. Excuse me, I'm raising my hand 3 minutes.
You're okay. I can't see everybody's face, so try and use the hand raise sign if you can.
I'm using that.
I can't.
On the side. Okay. Hi, my name is Diana. I'm coming.
Okay. Sorry. Carry on. I can't see that. Okay. Carry on.
So, hi to all. My name is Diana Radic. I'm coming from Croatian Chamber of Agriculture. And I would just like to refer what Federico said, and I think it's relevant to discuss on that there is a need for some unique scope that would be applicable on all member states, because there is high diversity in policy management and processes among member states. So some of them depend on decision makers. So if they will open the bridges or platforms, on some of them are very good organized, and I agree that we need good examples in this area. Also, there is a need for clear legislative scope that will not be removed if some political party comes on local level. This is very important to bring this platform kind of clean or clear from changes in political scene. So one of the things that we also see, it's a need to establish regular dialogue on CAP, to also an education of the some workshops, education of the members that are actually attending this kind of activities, because there is a need for analytical background and to give a right information to Commission. What we see also as a problem is a language barrier. I'm sorry, I have to say this, but for several years, we are here from 2013. There are 6 languages that are usually using, but we are not able to invite some of our rural experts because they don't know English or some of these European languages. Usually, this is also a problem to proceed the information. There is a lot of good examples, information in rural areas, but there is no budget on national level to translate these. Some of member states, they do that, but some not, so they don't see maybe a need for that. So this language barrier, I can see it's really relevant to do exchange of knowledge and to prepare for good communication among member states. So, and also strengthening the entire acquis system. I think for the rural development, this is a key to strengthen advisory service. For instance, some of the member states, they have 1 advisor per 500 farmers, and some member states, they have 100. So it's just this diversity brings different information and collection information, and then process how they actually bring this information to you abroad. I think I will finish here, but there is a lot of things that should be framed to help rural areas to bring their voice out to Commission. Thank you.
Okay, Tatjana, thank you very much. You covered a huge spectrum of things, going right down to the level of advisory services, and all those are absolutely necessary. Let's try and stay with the EU level. Certainly, what I've seen in other dimensions, for example, the environmental dimension and the social dimension, there is much more of a move to get environmental and social aspects raised in the semester process. I think it's a bit of an uphill struggle, and I think you're right. There's not the sort of governance there to back it up, and many of the other things that you've mentioned, Tatjana. But there is certainly attempts to put these issues, the green transition and also the just transition, in more of a context. So the question is, can we put the rural, in a higher, give it a higher profile in this way? Can I just see from some of the people who have not talked, for example, is Juha-Matti, are you there? Because Finland has a very interesting rural development governance structure. Maybe you come in, and then I would like to see what the opinion is of Patricia, because from this perspective of the French the view. So Juha, are you there?
Indeed. Hello, Paul.
Hi there.
Yeah, and hello everyone. I come from the Finnish Rural Network Support Unit. I don't have anything to say about the European level progress. Perhaps I'm support of the leader issue, and in that way I support from the grassroots level all the way to the top, and perhaps that's my aspect also here. We have a long history of rural policy committee in Finland, over 25 years, and it's a wide rural policy. And then we have a standing committee led by the Ministry of Agriculture, and then the vice chairman is the Ministry of Employment and Economics. So it's very highly ranked committee, and it's cross-cutting all the ministries, and they have done. I think they have done a good job in thinking the rural aspects concerning the healthcare issues and the infrastructural issues and so on and so on. And just now they are finishing the rural policy strategy and plan for next 7 years, and it's decided by the. And now the paper is more or less ready, and the government will approve that. So it has a high status for that, and it gives them overall umbrella for the wide rural policy in Finland. And under that umbrella, of course, there is rural development, who is tackling the issues which are some of the issues which are highlighted in the rural policy paper, and RDP issues are taking one side, and then of course other issues are dealt by the other elements and tools. The wish. So this is what's happening in grassroots level in Finland, and I think it would be. I know that under the OECD, so there is a discussion between these rural policy colleagues. But perhaps there could be a more discussion and more knowledge sharing under the organized by the ENRD as well. So inviting these rural policy makers, because I know that there are several construction in different countries. So inviting them to share their experiences, and also together with us, the ones who are making the rural development work. So because I think there is a gap of knowledge there, and perhaps we could do something there. So from the grassroots level, from the national level, all the way to the EU, and perhaps we could find a good ways to how to coordinate this issue on the EU level, which I believe it was greatly highlighted by Marjorie, that there is, I believe, a great need for that kind of processes also on the EU level and between the directorates as well. Sorry.
I think no, that's great, because you in Finland and now France with this rural agenda seem to be two of the countries, and there are some others, but not so many.
Sweden as well, they have done a very excellent work, and that's, I'm not expert on this issue, but I believe, and it was very interesting to hear the French example indeed. So it would be nice to hear that more later. So
that's a practical thing we can do, actually, exchange more on these national experiences, because I think what Marjorie is saying is that we would like some of the good practices that you're doing in Finland and France and Sweden to be also applied at the EU level. So some of these governance mechanisms, some of these systems for coordination and so on to be implemented at that EU level. Daniela, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I'm Daniela Storti from CREA in Italy, and just on this last point, I think that would be useful to share also the Italian experience from the inner area strategy. We are using this experience to draw conclusion and about how to improve next programming period from the experience we developed in the inner area strategies. And I believe that the two most important points that are coming out are regards the governance system between rural development and cohesion policies with specific reference to services and access to services and essential services. And also the other point that it is very important for rural areas is linked to ACIS system, so to the governance of knowledge systems. And this is another important point. But the main point is that we need to target our policies, in more clear-cut way towards specific territories, because all different objectives can be coordinated only working on a specific problem of the specific territory together with different level of government and implementing co-programming and co-projecting. Is the coordination and the integration can only happen when you build the program and the project thinking about specific people and specific places. So that's why I think that it's important to build these multi-level governments starting from targeting the specific territories. This is our experience in Italy.
Great. Okay, so we've got proposals for building and looking at what we can do at EU level from at least 4 different countries: Finland, Sweden, Italy, and France. I want to go, because we're going to run out of time. We've got about 11 minutes left, and I want to deal with some of the specific suggestions that Marjorie suggested. And this it will raise the whole question of chicken and egg again. But Marjorie suggested 3 concrete actions that could be taken to progress towards this vision at EU level. One was the definition of specific targets, measures, and indicators, so the data. The other was developing guidelines with the criteria, incentive, co-funding rates for the particular aspects of the rural. And the last was the need for research and better information. And there's been a suggestion of some sort of rural observatory that could collect information more widely across Europe. So what do people think about those specific proposals? Daniela, you have your hand up still. I don't know if you want to say something.
I don't know how to bring,
your hand down. Okay. Don't ask me. I'm not very good at this hand raising and stuff either. Yeah. Anyone want to come in on those? So this is the definition of specific targets, measures, and indicators for the fields that were mentioned. So Marjorie talked about a diversified economy, services, which Daniela, you just raised, innovation, and so on. These issues. Can I see anyone? Yeah, Alexia wants to come in. Good, Alexia, come in.
Yes, sorry, the applause was raising an issue, but I completely agree. And after going through weeks of analytical work on rural innovation, I think one thing that comes out is that we don't have enough data and good data to characterize rural innovation because it's a bit specific, does not necessarily relate in patents and scientific publications. And so it's under recognized and undervalued, or actually we don't know if it's undervalued or if it's really less, but we don't have enough because the frameworks for the framework for measuring innovation have been urban centric so far. And so in the innovation domain, I agree that would be a need. Target, what would be the target? I don't know, but definitely you would need to bring together better understanding and data first, and then you can say, okay, this is what's not working, and that's where we would like to go. So then you can go a target. At the moment, we have so little; it's hard to define a good target. We even see it in the EIP domain. Output indicators, yeah, how much money you have put into it, yes, but how much innovation is actually happening on the ground? This is not so easy to characterize.
Okay, that's
really
one.
Something. If we could push it, that would be great. Yeah.
So that is one. Sorry, somebody was saying. Yeah. Was that my echo? Yeah. So that's one proposal, that we need more clearer, genuine rural data of a whole range of kinds, and Marjorie has actually suggested a whole series of areas. So does anyone want to say anything else about the data level? Can I take that as going, gone? It's something that people support? I can't get everybody to put their hands up because that would really collapse the system. Okay. Anyone else want to say anything? Yes, Jella, on the data side. And this is sparked off something. Data gets people going. Okay, Jella.
Yes, I think we already have some information sources, and now I think there are these dashboards which are collecting data for impact indicators for the future policy. And there are also socioeconomic indicators, but it's very difficult to use them for seeing the real picture. The data are important, but I think we have to work more to get reliable information, what is going on down in rural areas, and also to put emphasis on evaluation in this aspect, because data are just macro data, which are not saying much. So we have to see if there has been the effect of rural policy, if there's all what we are talking now about during these days should be somehow looked at. So we have to put emphasis on these approaches and methods to see what is actually happening there, because macro data say not much.
Okay, data, Marianne, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was still thinking about the remark that was made about the language, all the different languages we have, and the trouble it gives to bring information up from the grassroots level to the EU level. So maybe it's also wise to develop some sort of visual communication, or use it more at least, instead of more words and more data. So make it more visual, because that can connect us better, perhaps.
Okay, this is about communication, I think. Yeah, okay, getting through to people, bringing people on. We need the hard data, I think, as well, for if we're going to get targets or anything like that. But yeah, good point.
Visualize them.
Yeah, okay, good point. So can we take the other points that Yella's got her hand up, Marianne? Okay, the other points that were raised, the targets. Does anyone has, these are, I mean, if you're going to get involved in anything like the semester, if you don't have a target, we don't have targets for services or for innovation, as Alexia was saying, or some of the other issues, then it's very difficult to make clear demands and get your point across. Anyone want to say anything about targets? I think you're all getting very great. Is there another hand down here? Federico, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I already spoke, so I
That's okay. And Helen wants to come in. That's good.
Well, I think just to add that, I mean, perhaps we do have one target there in the semester that is relevant for rural, is the broadband one, because I think throughout the event so far, I mean, that's been seen as a critical factor, and there we have a target at EU level.
I mean, that's an example of a target. So, I mean, what you're saying is that what I think Marjorie is proposing is that that sort of broadband type target should be extended to other areas, like, for example, access to certain distance, as the French said, 30 minutes some distance from services, or measures of diversification, or whatever. So, yeah, Federico.
Yeah, just. Sorry, I'm going back to the issue of governance, because we're discussing, I mean, but related to targets and indicators and so on, because we are discussing the targets and everything, but the question is also who is defining those targets.
Okay.
And the issue of governance is precisely this, because I mean, when we talk about decision making, it's about government. I mean, who is in the decision making loop? So if we're talking about the semester, the recommendations have a lot of weight in the European semester cycle. So I mean, we've been talking a lot the past couple of days. We've been talking a lot about how to involve the citizens, the democratic process, and so on and so forth. But I don't see any, if there is no clear governance on all these issues in the rural vision, the long-term vision, there can't be any other solution that would work and that would be fit with the needs in the ground. So I don't see where is the balance between these two. We should find.
Okay.
I think first comes the governance that defines or helps defining the targets and the indicators and all the, and then we at European level, because otherwise how the European level can decide without having all the, and I'm sorry, but the CAP, the next CAP, and all these policies that relate to the rural development are not going in this direction. So I will stop here.
Okay, I think that's a very important point. You say it's the chicken and egg, and you're saying that the I don't know which is first, but you're saying basically that we have to have the governance first in order to define the targets, the guidance, and decide on the data that is needed to feed on that. So does anybody, so okay, on the governance, and maybe I'll come back to Marjorie on that. Is there somebody, Tajana, you have your hand up, okay?
Yeah, I would just like to add what also Federico said. There is need for some scope for criterion how to select stakeholders, some kind of stakeholder metrics for topics, because this is really, there is needed guide for that. So that would be also relevant to what you said.
What do you mean by that? Is selecting stakeholders for governance mechanisms or some sort of idea of balance?
Because a lot of, there is a need of knowledge of policy activities. And this is also a process that should be guided for those who will select who will be the one in the group and talk about some topic. There should be some criterion for those who want to be involved to give feedback what is needed regarding the topic there is discussion.
Okay.
You cannot take the one that they don't know, for example, the topic.
Okay, we're going to be cut off. So Alison has got her hand up. Just quickly, can you try and say something? What do you want to say? Alison from Marc. We're sorry. We're.
So welcome back. I believe that now all the groups have been redirected back in plenary, and I do hope that you have found interest in the discussion. I hope you had some interesting discussions and that you have enjoyed them. Before we actually make an attempt at reporting and try to have some feedback, I want to share just my screen one more time, because we have prepared for you just an easy questions. We want to give you the opportunity to share your take-home messages through Mentimeter. So I would like to invite you to go just to menti.com. Ideally, it would be great if you can do that with your smartphone so that we don't risk to lose you if you use your browser, if you use your laptop. But otherwise, just through your browser, all you need to do is to go to menti.com and you introduce the code 29326830. And all we're asking you to do is to drop some keywords regarding the key messages that you're taking home from the discussions that you have joined, from the discussions we had in this session. And so thanks for your contribution. We will get to see to the word cloud later in the before just closing the meeting. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleagues who have been facilitating different group sessions, just to try to collect the key messages. And many thanks to Christina, my colleague, for sharing here this beautiful Miro board. We will try to collect the key messages, indeed resulting from the discussions, both on the way on the vision that we have in front of us, so the key ideas, and also the key steps necessary, step changes to for our journey to get there, to get to the vision. So may I turn first of all to group number one, with the focus of which, the starting focus of which was rural governance. Paul, you were facilitating that group discussion. Would you be ready to provide us with some feedback, with some key messages?
Yes, okay. Well, I'm going to frame this around, because Marjorie gave a very concise and clear, made a very concise and clear proposal, which is involvement in the semester and around a series of key rural issues, such as diversification, services, food, innovation. The discussion in terms of what the vision should address really revolved around the question of the governance. The governance, put that separate point. So what comes first, and the need to have a democratic governance mechanism in order to define many of the things that would be raised in the semester. So there was a big question that ran all the way through the discussion about where the effort should be put. Should it be put on trying to get a wider involvement and a more stakeholder involvement in the whole process, or also in the semester, which is a process that involves the managing authorities and the member states and the Commission. So it's a different kind of mechanism. So that was in terms of what should be what the issue that should be in the vision, if you like. It's the governance and the mechanism of the semester, if you like. Shall I go to the next bit, to the what needs to happen?
Yeah, please, I'd say so. We better collect all.
Yeah, okay. And I didn't hear any people saying no to these suggestions, but the three areas covered were the definition of targets, measures, and indicators. So that's all one point. Guidelines as a separate one. data, and genuine data, rural data. There was a strong consensus on rural data, I think. The need for better information about all these things in order to do all the others. And then the other concrete suggestion, which to me came out of this, but if other people, if I leave something out, please say, is that they were to take examples from other member states, from member states that have national agendas or plans of some kind. And we had Finland, Sweden, Italy, the inner area study, and France. So those were some concrete suggestions there. And to use those as examples for maybe the governance and the other points.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Quickly moving forward, I'm going to invite Enrique from Group 2 on rural proofing. That was the starting focus of the discussion. Please, Enrique, would you like to share with us the key messages resulting from your group discussion?
Thank you, Flavia. I think rural proofing was the starting point and I think the ending point of our discussion. It was such an interesting topic that we dedicated most of the time to it. I think what it highlights as thing to have in the vision is that the rural development should be supported by many other policies, not just the CAP. So that's the recognition of that. And that rural proofing is one of the elements that needs to be acknowledged within the vision, but in a way that it's made into practice. So it brings real outcomes. So it does not state just in nice words, but it is able to build a pragmatic approach to really implement it. Then in terms of the actions on how to get there, first of all, it was recognized that this rural proofing cannot wait for the vision to start its implementation. Participant mentioned that it needed to start now, and particularly now, for instance, with the recovery plan and all these funds that are allocated, we need to start looking at them. There was a recognition that there is some sort of disjointment between the different policies, and therefore a stronger argument to have rural proofing in place. There were different suggestions made in order to make rural proofing a reality. One, it's a task force composed of civil, with the involvement of civil society, but also the different legislative bodies, so European Parliament and Commission, that looked at the policies that are able to provide guidance. Another one was on the use of the territorial impact assessment, particularly with a focus on rural areas. And this one, there was a practical suggestion, which is to include this actually within the better regulation rules. So it is actually something that rural proofing then is implemented later on. Although at the same time, there were as well comments about keeping this whole process simple and realistic. So here there is an issue of finding a balance. And if I can highlight just two last points. So one is about the institutional capacity. There was a suggestion to have some sort of body that is, or a facility that is able to provide assistance and capacity building activity to managing authority, because the risk is that imposing something that it is new and requires additional resources to be done, this might build certain disparities with those countries that might have these possibilities to do that, and those that do not have that capacity at the moment. And this is a recurrent issue that comes with the implementation of new concepts, like in the past it happened with LEADER and many others, and for instance, more recently, perhaps as well with smart villages. And the third one, the last point I wanted to mention, it's about the rural proofing is about bringing gradual change. So here we are not looking at a revolution, but rather an evolution, that rural issues are gradually taken into consideration by other policies, by other departments. So we need to look at it from this perspective. And I think those are the most outlined points. I have more, but I would like just to highlight this one.
We'll use anyway all other points for reporting after this session, so we will not lose them. And now I will myself share some key messages resulting from the Group 3 discussions, which moved from the perspective of, actually, we have been pretty much discussing all the time the focus on the rural intelligence, so collection of data, and how data is collected at the local level can help shaping the policy and implement the policy. And in that respect, of course, we take note of the challenge of the policy, especially at the EU level, to harmonize data across different countries, but at the same time to be flexible enough to target specific needs in the different territories, and that's indeed a challenge. And to that end, it will be important, of course, as an idea to further involve citizens in the process of collection of data. So that's an interesting idea and approach of citizen science, also allowing the citizens to be a direct source of information and in the data collection. At the same time, and that's quite a paradox and interesting, we have people demanding for data being collected more at the local level and for more involvement of the rural people in the active collection of data. But then there is lack of trust in when people are involved. So we should work, and that's perhaps a step change and the condition. So we could have a green posting for that. As a precondition, we need to build trust and explain people what this data will be used for, and what is the advantage for them actually of to share this data. And as a further idea, so we will go back to the yellow post-its. As a further idea, there's this interesting experience in the Netherlands of having a dashboard which provide a kind of an overview on the broader welfare at the regional level, so linking many different data and indicators. And the advantage of that is that people, it might help also to increase awareness of people of what are also the social benefits of farming activities for many other aspects of the quality of life in more in general of welfare. And as further ideas also, it is essential to ensure the co-creation in the process of collection of data and elaboration of data, bringing together different actors, relevant actors. And one more point, we shouldn't look only at quantitative data, but also qualitative data, and at the temporal data on the temporality, so that offers trends about development, not only for fixed years. And one last point that should go definitely on what is needed at step change. In the vision, it should be possible to concrete identify the scopes and the territories where changes should happen from now until 2040. So there should be, we should have a clear prioritization and a clear indication of the concrete area where we believe that in a way, in a limited time from now until 2040, actually change is really possible. And that's all from our group discussion. And I will immediately turn to the discussion that Veronica, my colleague, has been leading on Group 4 on the rural communities. Veronica.
Thank you, Flavio. And I'm aware we have just 2 minutes left, so I will try to be concise, but at the same time, the discussion in our group was very important because it was about rural communities. So I bring perspective from local level, which is crucial as well. So first point for the vision that we were discussing is that the bottom-up approach should be used in addressing needs. And this should link to the governance, so bottom-up approach. And then also the importance of local active leadership is very high in addressing the needs. And the third point I want to make here is that it is important to secure connection between knowledge centers and rural areas, so kind of knowledge transfer. To also collect data to link to your input, but also to, for example, measure the value of certain processes, certain activities. So this was for the vision, and for the journey, for the next steps. Here we were quite concrete. We need more decentralized support. and more place-based or tailor-made. So responding to the actual local needs, and also removing bureaucracy and red tape is important. Yes, I think I kind of try to summarize. Maybe Marion, she raised the hand. She wants to add in something.
Yes, I always want to. Yes, thank you for giving me the word. I always want to add in leader and CLLD. I know it was mentioned many times, and I think it should then show also on the board. It is a method that we now have 30 years already, and it's grown and it's very well functioning. So we should not reinvent the wheel, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marion. Thank you very much, Veronica. And now I'm just going to ask Enrique, as a way to tell us goodbye, actually, to share the workload that you've been feeding with your inputs. Hopefully, Enrique, many thanks for that. But let me again thank you all very much for having joined us. I see we still have 90 participants connected, and that's actually impressive. And it's really nice to see this workload there with the key messages you're taking home from the discussions. Indeed, bottom up, gender proofing. Oh, that's really great. That's a very nice message that I take very well. The trust, of course, and local empowerment. I hope you have a rewarding feeling from the discussions. I hope you have enjoyed them. I would like to thank very much you all, but especially all our speakers that have been supporting us and have been here with us today. And I hope you will keep enjoying also the upcoming events tomorrow. We have the fringe events and especially the Rural Inspiration Awards ceremony for those of you who will be joining that. And then on Friday, we will be ready for some concluding sessions for the overall event. Thank you very much for your contribution, and stay tuned because reports also from these sessions will be coming up. Thank you all, and I hope to see you soon in some other events of the NRD.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Flavio.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Flavio.